Hey guys, a neighbor was kind enough to give me this Craftsman LT 1000 tractor. It's pretty rotted. The shell itself wasn't really worth saving, you know, it's kind of falling apart. But I pulled the motor off. Here it is. It's a Briggs & Stratton 20 horsepower V-twin. It's one of those IC engines, so I guess it's probably an Intek IC. It's got an oil filter, pressure lubrication, cast iron bore, the whole 9 yards, but it is locked up, doesn't move at all. So I think this will make a good teardown video. We'll take it apart, see why it's locked up, and see if we can unlock it and free it up. Took the engine outside and gave it a bath, and brought it inside, put it on the bench to work on. I noticed that there's ants all over it. So it seemed to be coming from the air cleaner cover. Let's see, take this off and see what we find. This thing was dirty, like filthy dirty. Not sure we're gonna find in here. Probably an ant's nest, right? Doesn't even want to come off. Oh boy, what are we gonna find? Not even sure how it comes off. Pry it off with a screwdriver. Is it hinged? There we go. Get ready, everybody. Well, that's not tragic, right? Dad? Wonder where those ants are coming from. Okay, that's pretty tragic. Oh, there's a bug in there. Looks like a cockroach. Oh, more ants. Right in there. Lake brake cleaner usually kills them on contact. Let's see if I got some. Can't talk today. Okay. Let them fester for a while. Let's take the blower housing off. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a disaster under here. Couple 3/8 bolts. Looks like they were designed it so you don't have to take the bolts all the way out. You just loosen them. It's a nice touch. Not sure how many there are. We got them loose. There's gonna be bugs everywhere, I can tell. Okay, so we got that. We got to take this this cover off here. 5/16 nut driver. Maybe. A little bit of corrosion there. Man. I think one of these is going to break. It must. Nope, so far so good. Haven't broken anything yet. Wow, look at that. Nothing broke. Shocking. So these are so this is going into plastic. These are pretty coarse threaded screws. A little bit of rust too. I'm sure the bath I gave it didn't help. How many hours are on this thing? It looks like it's a 2002 model. The Briggs & Stratton code begins in 02. So she's an old girl. We got some screws in the bottom here to take out. So we jack this thing up so we can do that. Got all the bolts loose. This cover should slide right off. And hopefully out with it, not with a lot of bugs. Oh my. Oh my, 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 my. A little bit of a disaster here. A lot of, oh wow, cucaracha. Let's get the brake cleaner. He's right there. He doesn't like that. Sorry guys. He's on the floor. Yuck. He's probably not the only one in there too. Jeez. Let me brush all this stuff out and get rid of it. This is pretty jam-packed with leaves. I'm kind of expecting there to be a problem with this cylinder head. I'm guessing we have gonna have a cooling issue. Hard for this thing to stay cool if there's stuff gummed up in it. And when the engine can't cool itself off, they overheat. When they overheat, valve guides tend to walk, among other problems. So this thing might be a lost cause. Wow, it's packed in there. Jeez. Might have to take this outside and hose it off again. That's really bad. Well, that ended up turning into a much bigger ordeal than I thought. I ended up taking the blower housing and all the tins off outside. They were packed, jam-packed with leaves and probably 5 or 6 more cockroaches and ants. It was bad. So sorry you guys didn't get to see that, but you're probably better off. It was bad, bad, bad. So I'm gonna let it dry off for a while and hopefully all the critters are gone. I got it on the edge of the garage just in case any critters do crawl out, but assuming none do, then we'll pick it up. I haven't seen a living creature come out of this thing for over a day now, so hopefully we've evicted all the cockroaches. I noticed the motor is not locked up. That must have been just the belt on the mower deck that was holding it from moving. It's a little, feels a little crunchy, but not tragic. I think the first step in all this is to get this pulley off. Sometimes these can be a little tricky without damaging them. I'm going to try loosening this bolt that holds the pulley on. It's a 5/8. There we go. I'm also going to try putting this 2-jaw puller on here. I'm going to watch the pulley very carefully because we don't want to bend it. I'm going to set this puller up on here and we're going to tighten it slowly and just see if it moves. If it doesn't, it might need to apply some heat. Oh, I think it's moving already. Oh, that was real tough. That never happens. I mean, literally never. How often do things that have been on there for 1,000... Oh, there's anti-seize on here. Thank the previous guy. Thank you. Hallelujah. Boy, I wish it was easy all the time. So I think the next step, because we saw so much debris on the cooling fans and so many cucarachas, I think we're going to pull the valve covers. I'm half expecting to see some bent push rods, but you know what? I've been wrong before. Hopefully I'm wrong again. Apologize in advance for the background noise, guys. It's July in South Florida. It's brutally hot even at night. It's probably like 8:30 at night right now. So again, apologize, but got to work comfortably, right? I'm using a 3/8 socket and I buzz off these valve cover bolts. Probably proceed to get oil all over the floor. That's usually what happens, right? Oh, I see some drippage. Let's get some towels. Let's move this thing back to minimize the mess. We actually have this pan right here. Might as well use it, right? So I have no idea what we're going to find. Well, I have some idea, but I don't know for sure. A lot of the rubber on this motor is toast. So like this hose right here that drives the fuel pump, that thing is toast. It's all cracked and rotted. I pulled the fuel pump off camera. That fuel line was all rotted and nasty too. Okay. So now what I'm looking for here is the valve guide. I want to see if it's walked a little bit. So far I'm not seeing any evidence of that, which is kind of cool. Kind of debating how far I want to pull this thing apart. Because if it's in reasonably good shape, why mess with it, right? So there are rocker arms. This actuates the exhaust valve, which comes out the exhaust port right here. And our intake valve is right here from the intake port. So again, I'm just kind of eyeballing things. Let me get a light and look down in there a little bit. See if we can see anything useful. Let there be light, right? Neither push rod looks obviously bent. That's a good sign. I'm looking in between the spring. So in between the little, what do you call them? The coils of the spring. I'm looking for evidence that one of the valve guides might be higher up than another. I don't see any on this side. That's a good sign. So maybe all that nesting took place after this thing started sitting, and maybe it's in okay shape. I'm going to take these bolts and just kind of thread them back in there so we don't lose them. Yeah, I suppose I should have just checked this thing to see if it would run. But, you know, it's, I think, a 2002 model. I think. So now it's in the other valve cover. It's probably worth going through anyway. What kind of YouTube video would it be if we don't take this thing apart fully, right? All right, I'm gonna get you guys turned, or gonna turn the motor around. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Here we go, other side. Again, 3/8 socket. think after this we'll pull the plugs, see what things look like there. Like I said, so far I'm pleasantly surprised here. Let's see what we see. Any bent push rods? I don't see any obviously bent push rods. That's a good sign. And I probably should have explained a little bit better what happens when these things overheat. The valve guide, which is just press fit into the aluminum head, has a tendency to loosen up. So we might have a 1 or 2,000th interference fit from the machining process. You know, get the cylinder head up, heated up really hot when they're making them, and they'll just kind of push that valve, drop that valve guide in. When it cools down, that'll hug onto that valve guide really nicely. Now, if these things overheat, like if these cooling fins get really clogged with debris, that valve guide will loosen up and it'll start to walk. Usually it'll walk out of the cylinder head up towards the rocker arm, right? And when that happens, the valve can't open fully and the push rod is the weakest link and the push rod gives way. So I'm happy I don't see bent push rods, or at least not obviously bent. They still could be bent, just not visible, but they look pretty straight to me. Let's pull some spark plugs now. One thing I noticed when I was cleaning this thing up, which I think is kind of odd. Notice this thing here? This engine has full pressure lube, but it doesn't have an oil filter. That's an oil filter block-off plate. Why do that? I guess save money? Who knows? Why else does anybody do anything these days? Okay, let's take this plug out. See what we see. Hopefully a lot of nothing. And hopefully these plugs look nice and consistent. That one doesn't look too bad. I'll let you see it in a second. Pull the one off the opposite side. Yeah, they look more or less the same. Come on. There'll be light. Is that in focus? Zoom in a little bit, maybe. There we go. It's a little bit better, right? I mean, they're used. They're definitely a little worn, but could be a lot worse. I don't see major inconsistencies from side to side, which is a good thing. You know, one isn't totally white or totally black or foul with oil. They look kind of consistent, which is great. So we might have a good motor here. I don't want to jinx it. So what should we do next? Let's get the carburetor off. Undoubtedly, whatever condition this thing is in, it's going to have carburetor issues, right? It's just been sitting for too long. So I think we're going to start by just taking the whole intake manifold off. And I'm sure we end up ordering a gasket set for this thing. But to get the intake off, it looks like there's 2 bolts here, 2 bolts here. They look like they're a little annoying to get through. They're Torx with a hex on the outside. I'm going to try just sticking a 3/8 wrench on them. Let's see if that does the trick. Okay, so make it so you guys can see. I feel like I might have Loctite on them. Let me work on these for a little bit. I got you guys on the better lit side. So I got bolts loosened, or I got them off on this side. Just working on the 3/8 wrench this side. Not quite a bit of an angle this way. Maybe can I sneak this in here? Yeah, that'll work. So it looks like there might just be one bolt we can't get with the attachment that we'll have to get with a wrench. Let me give it one more. No, I don't want to round it off. So the bolt on the opposite side, take that off with the wrench. Got all 4 bolts off. So the carburetor the whole intake manifold should come off. We do have our governor linkage, which hooks onto this little rod down here. Can we unhook this without making a mess, breaking anything? I think there's still a breather hose that we're attached to on the other side. Just push that out from the inside of the air cleaner housing. Hopefully that's the right way to do it. Yeah, that seemed to do it. There we go. Let's disconnect. Let's pull off our fuel shutoff solenoid. Maybe. Let's coming. There we go. So there's our carburetor and intake manifold assembly. So we have a single fuel ball, our fuel shutoff solenoid, and it looks like a 2-barrel carburetor. One for each cylinder. Don't know what brand it is yet. Oh wait, do I? It's hard to read. It's a Briggs and Stratton logo on there. Maybe they made it, who knows. Alright, so we got our intake manifold off. Let's take the starter off next. I lied, I think we're going to take the flywheel off. That should make it considerably lighter. So that's going to be an 1¼ inch socket. I'm going to use my Ingersoll Rand 1/2 inch impact gun. Okay, didn't really put up much of a fight. It's supposed to be 150 foot-pounds. It sure didn't seem like it. Now, I highly doubt this thing is going to be as cooperative coming off as the pulley was. So let's hit it with some PB Blaster. Let's get this washer off first. And while you're looking, just check to see you don't have a sheared flywheel key. It doesn't look like we do here. Let's take these fan bolts off. Looks like with maybe a 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch it is. Let's buzz these off. Now our fan should pop off, like so. I don't see anything alive, which is a good sign. Let's get this fan out of the way. Now, I don't have the Briggs & Stratton prescribed puller tool for this, but I do have an old steering wheel puller that I think might work, hopefully. If not, I'll break it. So it's got 2 bolts. Screw them into the threads where the fan screws were. Back this out a little bit. Might break it, might work, who knows. Got nothing to lose, right? I feel like I've used it for this before. Maybe I'm wrong. Alright, that works. We'll thread that other bolt in there. Like so. Hopefully you guys can see that fixture there. Maybe there's a better view. And then you just simply tighten down this hex right here, and that should pop the flywheel off or break something. Here goes nothing. Got my 1/2 inch socket and a 3/8 drive. Let's tighten and see what happens, right? I don't think I want to get my hands in there. This way. Jeez, that's on there. What if we should get the air chisel? Should we try the air chisel? Think that'll help? I don't want to break this. Make sure we're on there square. Let's try buzzing it with the impact. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, but maybe the jolt will help. And it did. Look at that. Got lucky. Oh, thank God, no critters. So you can use a steering wheel puller to do this. Zoom you guys out a little bit. Let's get this flywheel out of the way. Put that on the ground over here. I know you can't see what I'm doing. So here, just to explain what's going on, here's our crankshaft, obviously. We have our stator here, which is a charging coil. This is to charge the tractor batteries. I'm really happy I don't see any critters in there. I was a little worried about that. I'm gonna thread this nut back on there just so we don't lose anything. I don't like losing parts. Maybe we'll thread it on there, I don't know. There we go. Okay, all right. Now let's take the starter off. Change my mind again. I really have no plan, I don't know what I'm doing. Let's take off the coils. I got a 5/16 nut driver. Maybe not. I hit them with some PB Blaster again. I hit them before. Now, if I was doing this just trying to like isolate a problem, I wouldn't have started by just taking this thing apart. That's kind of a dumb way to do it. I would have diagnosed the problem. So, for example, let's say we're dead on a cylinder, right? One cylinder is making power, the other one's not. I might start by pulling, with the motor running, start by pulling a spark plug and see which one, see which cylinder dies, which one is making power, which one's not. Is that cylinder getting spark? So I'm approaching this differently than I normally would. This is really more for entertainment value and showing you guys how to take these things apart and put them back together. Because again, I'm not really diagnosing a problem. I'm just stripping this thing down, or at least I guess I've decided to do that, right? Let me get a 5/16 socket. Plus, it's kind of cool to take these things apart, right? It's not every day you find these things in the trash. Okay, that's loose. 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 Glad these aren't breaking. I'm glad I didn't jinx myself. I see right away we got a problem right here. This is one of the coil ground wires. And it looks like something either chewed through that, or maybe the flywheel did, or I don't know. Maybe. And I can see on the other coil where it's supposed to go, it's completely removed. So we'll have to deal with that. Otherwise, if you don't deal with that, you try to turn the thing off, you're only going to shut off one cylinder. So you see here, this wire here is supposed to get connected right there, but it ain't. Not even sure if these coils work. Looks like you've seen better days. It'd be fun to just kind of put this thing back together and remove all the rust, and maybe we'll throw the parts in the sandblaster and hit it with some walnut shells. Clean it up real nice, get the oxidation off. That'd be fun, right? Kind of cool, a little different. Kind of like one of those other YouTubers out there, like the machinery restorer guy. The one where you don't hear him say a word, he just takes these things apart, cleans them up, puts them back together. And you guys would probably prefer if I'd stop talking, right? I just babble and babble and babble and babble and babble and babble and babble. Oh, never mind. On this coil here, the laminations are starting to come apart and swell, so I'm not even sure these coils were any good. Hopefully. Might have some spares buried somewhere. I don't throw anything out. So for now, we'll just stick the coils in the parts bin. Again, I'm taking all the screws and nuts and bolts and whatnot and putting them back where they came from so we don't lose anything. It's silly to have to order new parts, or new screws rather, especially if the ones you have are still good and you lost them. Keep your workstation clean. I think I might call it a night for now. It's getting kind of late. I'm all sweaty. I smell like engine oil. We got this thing pretty well stripped down. I don't see any critters in there, which is great. All right, till next time. Let's see if we can get some oil out of this thing. I'm not sure if this is gonna work out, but let's give it a quick test. Yep, so there's some oil coming out. So let me get my oil drain pan, which is over here somewhere. It's full of hair and other disgusting things, but it doesn't really matter. It's going to get filled with oil. We'll probably have to rotate this thing so all the oil lines up and drips out. Got the drain pan on the floor. Just gonna rotate this a little bit, get some of the oil off the other side. There we go. That's draining better. Now that we have 99% of the oil out, let's start stripping off some other stuff here. Get it down to its bare bones, right? Let's do this bracket right here. 5/16 screws on either side. That one's a little crunchy, but I think it's coming out okay. Let's try the other one. Perfect. I did hit these with PB Blaster last night. So they've been sitting all night. It's a lot of times when you get these steel screws and aluminum and they've been sitting for years, they'll snap off. And you gotta deal with broken bolts. That's no fun. Gonna have a bad time. Is that from South Park? I think it was from South Park. That reminds me, I think there's a new couple episodes of South Park that I haven't seen. I don't know if you guys watch that. I've been watching it since I was in high school. I'm dating myself now. Got that plate off. I'm gonna put these screws back where they came. Just so we don't lose anything. Interesting, it looks like there's a cylinder head gasket on both sides, has like this orange tinge to it. Please tell me that's not RTV. Let's get this bracket off now. A couple 3/8 bolts. And by a couple, I mean exactly 2. Take them out, put them back in. And also take note of your governor spring and your governor linkage. So that's kind of how it came out, like that. Right? We have our spring on like that, and kind of that middle slotted groove. Tell you, that's one of the reasons I take these videos, just so I remember how to put all this stuff back together. It does come in handy sometimes when you're moving real fast or you don't have time to pay close attention to what you're doing. Put this speed controller governor bracket in the parts box. We got our governor arm here. Let's take off the stator. Whoops. But first we have to drop our ratchet, and that's not a 5/16. Let me get a smaller wrench for that. Stator is held on with a couple of 1/4" screws, again, which I soaked ahead of time. They all seem to be coming out smoothly, thankfully. Sometimes these things break off too. Where are the wires from this thing? They're well hidden. I think it's almost time to get into the guts of this thing. Pull the cylinder heads. Pull the crankcase sump. And see what we see in there. And hopefully it's in good shape. It's in good shape, like I said. And stick the crankcase in the sandblaster. We'll hit it with some walnut shells. Clean it up, get the oxidation off. Get a gasket set. See if there's any broken or worn internal parts. Hoping there aren't. Maybe this will be a nice motor. There we go. There's our stator. Don't want to send the stator through the parts washer or the sandblaster. That wouldn't be good. So I wonder, how does that hook up? So those wires looks like they're soldered on there. Let's get these Torx bits off and get this plate off. Torx. I do have Torx screwdrivers somewhere. Maybe this one? Is this one the right size? That is not the right size. Let's get the right size. In this case, the right size is a T27 Torx. I'm using these little Bondhus T-handle Torx. These things are awesome. I'll give you a link where you can buy these. They work out really well. They're super strong. They make Allen keys. They obviously make these. I use them all the time. I keep them right where my sockets are. That's how often I use them. So they've earned a spot on my work, one of the high traffic areas of my toolbox. You got 4 screws here. Two, 3, and last one down here, 4. And this whole plate should come right off, hopefully. And look at that, it does. Careful not to damage the stator. We'll take that off in a moment. Got the motor tilted back a little bit. Let's see if we can disconnect our stator from the wiring harness. Set that aside again so we don't damage it. Just pull it clear of the dipstick. That was easy. Actually makes our starter bolts a lot easier to get to. A couple of 1/2-inch bolts. Barely even tight. I think the previous owner said that this starter was new, where he replaced it. That could have been 5 years ago though, so who knows. I'll set that starter aside. Let's get the rest of our wiring harness out of the way. Fish it around, whoops, fish it around the dipstick. All right, there we go. Make a mess while you're at it too. Gotta take the cylinder head off, or at least this cylinder head. This is the one that is on the side where the dipstick is, and it's just held on with a couple of 1/2-inch bolts. Gonna kind of loosen them up. I'm not taking the rocker arms out just yet, don't need to. We'll disassemble the cylinder heads later when we clean them up and inspect them for damage and so on. This bad boy should pop right off. Should being the operative word. Maybe there's a dowel pin or something holding it in. Yeah, there was. Some water in that cylinder bore. May have been from when I cleaned it up though. Get you guys a better view. So here's your exhaust push rod, your intake push rod. There's our water, or maybe it's an, oh, you know what, I forgot I sprayed some oil in here last night. Probably an oil-water mixture. Let's take a look at the cylinder head. Doesn't look too bad, there's some carbon in there, but that's kind of what you'd expect. Let's sop up some of that oil and water and take a better look at the bore, see what shape it's in. Yummy. I'm not sure how well you guys can see that, but you can still see a lot of the original cylinder cross-hatching when it was honed at the factory. The bore is very clean all the way around, no gouges, no scratches, nothing. Just a light honing, new rings, and should be good to go, at least for this cylinder. Let's get this one off. Okay. There we go. She's coming up. Looks like a similar water slash oil emulsion. Let's sop that up and see what we got. The reason why this oil's got kind of a red tinge to it is because of what I got in there. My little oiling can here is filled with a mixture of engine oil and trans fluid. I guess in looking at it now, we probably didn't have to pull this motor apart, but we're here, we're filming a video, so we might as well just do it, right? This cylinder appears to be more the same. Also appears to be in excellent condition. You can still see the original cross-hatching. Hopefully you guys can pick that up. So, excellent shape. Let's get our crankcase side cover bolts off so we can see what things look like inside there. Hopefully equally as good. I think we need our extension there. These look like half-inch bolts as well. They are. Looks like maybe there's some Loctite on these. Definitely is. Oops. Dropped you guys. Sorry about that, I dropped you guys. Got all of our bolts loose. Definitely Loctite on these. I wonder if maybe these aren't even torque to yield fasteners. We'll see. They're included in the rebuild kit, we know, right? Alright, so they have any pry points here for us to get this side cover off? Sometimes they give you those. Sometimes they don't. Don't see them here. Let's see if we can give it a little love tap on one of the bosses without breaking it. One of my brass punches. When I was pulling some footage off the camera yesterday, I realized I misspoke and said this engine has an oil filter. I think I corrected myself by saying the oil filter normally goes here, but I wonder if that's an option. That'd be kind of cool, right? Add the oil filter option. Just slowly give it a tap all the way around. If you didn't miss any screws, it should come right apart. Don't break anything. Starting to separate. on this a little bit. Got the side cover loose, a little bit of persuasion with the hammer, and gently prying with a couple flathead screwdrivers. And the cover just slides off like so. Happy to see we don't have a plastic cam. I don't know if any of you guys saw my previous video where we actually replaced the plastic cam in a Briggs Quantum. This actually seems to have a proper camshaft. It's kind of nice. Get you guys a zoomed in look. But this one doesn't even have the cutouts for, normally they'll do some weight reduction. Like here, you know, they'll cut out this gear, it won't be a solid gear. Let's make sure we can see the timing marks. And they're obvious, we got one there. Let's rotate it a bit so we can see them a bit better. Okay, so there are our timing marks. Get you zoomed in a little bit more. We got a notch right there. We got a notch on the edge of the crank gear right there as well. So when you put it back together, that's how you retime it. Let's pull this camshaft out. Let's pull this camshaft out. Maybe not. Maybe there's something on the backside holding it in. It can't be attached to the breather assembly. There's no push rods. Let's flip it on its side like that. There we go. It was hung up on some of the taps. Oh, that's a nice cam. This is not one of those El Cheapo cams you find on the newer stuff. That looks like it's cast and then machined. Get you a closer look at it. So that's all one solid piece of metal right there. And you notice this one has a notch in the end here to drive the oil pump, which is in the side cover. We'll take a look at that in a minute. And I'm leaking oil all over the bench. Fabulous. One of the super cool features, or serviceability features that Briggs & Stratton did with this is they labeled the cylinders. So you got number 1 right there, number 2 right there. If you look carefully, you also see number 1 on the connecting rod and a number 2 on the connecting rod as well. And those numbers line up, so you know how to get this thing apart and put it back together. Because direction normally does matter. You can't just throw stuff back together willy-nilly. In fact, I'm taking these little Ziploc bags. I'm going to label all the parts that come off each side of each cylinder. So I'm going to put all the number 2 intake parts in here, all the number 2 exhaust parts in the other bag, so we can keep everything straightened out. So I've got number 2 intake push rod, which is the aluminum one. The cylinder heads they only go on one place, so number 2 exhaust push rod. You can kind of just figure out which one's which by how they fit together, right? So just imagine putting it back together. So here, your exhaust push rod is going to be on the top. I'm sorry, your exhaust tappet rather. Put that in the exhaust bag, and the intake's going to be on the bottom. Super, super easy. Even I can't screw this up, guys. So just do that on both sides, and then when we take the cylinder heads apart, we'll put the rocker arms and whatnot in the bags as well. Got all of our valve train components labeled and in bags with the exception of the rocker arms, so we'll set these aside for now. Now let's take the piston and rod assemblies out. I'm going to work on cylinder number 2 first. I think it's 5/30 seconds. Jeez, they're on there. Just be careful here. All these engine block surfaces are super, super sharp. Real easy to ruin your day. Okay, the rod bolts are loose. Make sure you pay attention to which way this came off. It came off like that. I'm going to just push the piston and rod assembly out. I'm going to use the crank to do it first, and we'll just push it out by hand the rest of the way. Maybe. Sometimes if there's a ridge in the cylinder, it can be tough to get out. Take a little bit of Scotch-Brite and just take that off. Just taking a little bit of Scotch-Brite and just cleaning up the top ridge of the cylinder. They also make a tool called a ridge reamer that'll do this, but I don't have one of those. You don't really use them that often unless you're working on like super high mileage, disgusting stuff. Not really taking off any material here, just taking off the carbon and anything that might want to keep the piston from coming out of the bore. So that's probably 98% of it. Let's see if we can push it out now. And again, please be careful. Super sharp. Let's see if we can get the crank out of the way a little bit. Man, she's good and tight on there. Doesn't want to budge. Maybe a little bit more ridge reaming. Let's try that again. There we go. Oh, it's stuck in the head gasket. Oh man, don't I feel like an idiot. Maybe because I am an idiot. Jeez. Not one of my smarter moments, folks. Take note for the other side. I'm just putting the rod cap back on right away before we forget what the orientation was. And we'll get this head gasket off of here. Get it past the piston rings. Looks like it's stuck right above the oil control ring, so we'll just pull it down past. Work our way around. There we go. She's out. So interesting, I guess the connecting rods, are they universals? There's two on one side and one on the other. The two side was facing the back of the motor. That was facing up like that as we were removing it. So maybe they are universal and one side is one and one side is two when you flip them around. I do see the other one appears to have a thrust face. Oh yeah, here we go. That's how they do it. So notice here, this is a machine surface right here, and that acts as kind of a bearing between the two connecting rods. So they share the same crank journal, but you have to put these two faces against each other because that acts as a bearing surface between the two connecting rods. Gonna learn my lesson on this side and take the head gasket off first. Man, do I feel like an idiot. That was a rookie mistake. All right, head gasket removed. Loosen our rod bolts. Take our ratchet, wherever it went, somewhere. There we go. And again, this piston and rod assembly has the number 1 facing up. We're facing the back of the motor. Jeez. They are on there good and tight. we'll get these bolts out. Got our rod cap off, oriented just like that. Let's push this piston out. Hopefully we have some more luck with this one. Awkward angle. I did take the head gasket off, so that's not the issue here. Maybe I need to take some more material off the ridge of the cylinder. I got the Scotch-Brite. Clean that up real well. Let's try again. Give her a good push. Maybe let's push so you guys can see, right? You know what? Let me pull the crank out. Nothing holding on it anymore. Crank should slide right out now. Carefully. There we go. Give us some more room to push. We'll marvel at how beautiful this thing is in just a minute. For now, I just want to get it out of the way so I don't damage it. Sorry about that. And there is no head gasket here. I don't know what the problem is. Come on. There we go. Just came out. So let's put this back together really quick before we forget how it goes. Some of these are made so they only go back together one way. I don't know off the top of my head if this motor is one of those. Notice you have your machine surface facing up, so this side faces the back of the motor. Whew. Boy, it's hot in here. So let's get, I have another bag here for engine parts. I'm labeling it number 1. We're going to put the number 1 valve train components and the number 1 piston in here and keep it all together. And once we take the cylinder heads apart, crack open this bag and add the cylinder head components to the mix. So now we have a pretty much bare block. I mean, there's some stuff in there. Still have our oiled dipstick tube. I probably should have taken that off a while ago. A little bit of oil in there. Got our governor, which is actually really nice because this thing's metal too. I mean, that's super rare these days. You don't see metal governor gears like that. This is all plastic. I mean, it looks like metal. It looks like metal injection molded, most likely. But still, nice stuff. A lot better than what you see in the stuff you buy today. So let's set the block aside. It's super light now, which is kind of nice. We'll clean that up. Send it to. We're going to clean up all this stuff. Actually, it's not going to get reassembled like this. We're going to take everything apart, make sure everything's in good shape, so we don't put back together a broken engine. I wanted to take a minute just to go over some of the higher quality parts here, or I guess the more impressive parts. So now take note of that crank. So this crank is typical of what you would see in an automotive application. You see 2 oil holes there and there drilled to keep the rod bearings oiled. You also see an oil hole drilled right here to keep the rod journal, the crank journal oiled. And if you look carefully in the block, you can't really see it right now because it's kind of dirty. There's also an oil hole in this bearing right under my finger. So every critical surface in here is pressure lubricated. We didn't look at the sump yet. Let's take a quick peek at that. The sump is the same story. A lot dirtier, but you can see the oil hole right there. So this is an oil lubed application, pressure lubricated. Our oil pump actually sits right down in here. and we'll actually take the cover off the outside of the engine to get access to the oil pump assembly. It's kind of easier to put it back together that way. We'll get a good look at the Rotor Assembly to make sure it's in good shape. The screen is clear. I mean, there's a lot of, like dark stuff in the bottom of the pan, but that should clean right up. If you take a finger off on it, it comes right off. So overall, I'm pretty impressed with the shape this motor has been, just doing a quick visual. Again, there could be damage that's difficult to see during a teardown that you only see once all the parts are cleaned up. But overall, this looks like we have a pretty good motor. So, what else do we need to do? Is right? I guess we have to still disassemble the cylinder heads. I'm going to start cleaning some parts. I got the #1 piston and the ultrasonic cleaner. I'm going to let this run for a while. It's probably going to get super nasty. And already you can see the loveliness coming off of it. Floor is going to be black in no time. About 15 minutes in the ultrasonic cleaner. I mean, why would I even measure this piston? There's not a mark on this thing at all. The rod journal looks absolutely perfect. I'm not even going to measure it. It's in great shape. Let's do the next one. Here's the #2 piston before. Not really all that dirty either, but let's shove it in the ultrasonic cleaner and see what happens. While that other piston's cooking in the ultrasonic cleaner, I'm going to give the side cover and the block just a douse in the parts washer over there. Okay, got everything cleaned, or at least a first pass cleaning, just to get all the heavy stuff off. The goal of this cleaning was just to get all the heavy stuff out of the sump and to make the pistons cleaner, clean the cylinder heads up, just to find any obvious damage. Look at the crank journals, the cam, everything. So the goal here was not to make it clean enough to put back together, but merely just clean enough to do an inspection and get a lot of the oil off. Got the other piston out of the ultrasonic cleaner, came out super, super clean as well. I see no reason to replace this or even measure it for that matter. There's not a mark on it. What else did I want to say? Oh yeah, so live in South Florida, so that weird looking colored stuff that you see on the crank and on the cam is this fluid film here just to prevent corrosion, because like I said, I do live in South Florida and it's humid here. I don't want this the iron surfaces to flash rust, so I got the valve train coated, got the cylinder bores coated. Everything's a lot cleaner. So I think I'm going to call it a night. It's getting pretty late. Just got done cleaning up here. Next phase is to do a more thorough inspection. Still have some more disassembly to do. I have to take the oil pump apart, take the breather assembly apart, take the valve train apart, but that can wait for another day. Let's take the rocker arms out of the #1 cylinder heads. We're going to take off exhaust, then intake. That's just a 5/16 nut, or screw rather. What feels like Loctite. Jeez, that's tight. Okay, these are loose. I'm going to throw these in the parts bags, the respective parts bags for the #1 cylinder. So on the right we have our exhaust, on the left we have our intake. Yeah, there's definitely Loctite on these. Here's exhaust. And here's intake here. It's always good to keep this stuff together because all these parts tend to wear together. Sometimes if you got quick hands, you can push down on the valve spring and get the keepers out, but my hands aren't that strong. I don't need my valve spring compressor. Got one of the keepers out. Got the other one. So that's going to be for our exhaust valve. Just put it in the parts bag here. Now our spring should come off without too much angst. Got our spring. We have our keeper and the valve. You can see right there. Just real quick, it seems to be in reasonable shape, but it's hard to tell until you clean them up. So I'm just going to set this in the bag for now. Let's do the other valve. These valve spring compressors, you can get them online. They're not really all that exciting or all that expensive. I think I bought this at Sears maybe 10 years ago. And really all it does is it just compresses that spring. Kind of acts like a third hand, right? And it just lets you get in there with your tool to get the keepers out that go around the valve. I usually just use a magnet on them. But sometimes they don't want to cooperate, like when you're on camera. And then you have to get a pick and go at them. There's one. There's the other. Throw those in our parts bag too for number 1 intake. Take everything apart. Pull our valve out here too. So we've got our spring. Now this one has a valve seal. The exhaust valve does not. Intake valve's got a lot of carbon on it. Seems to be in okay shape though. Most importantly, I'm looking at the cylinder head. Again, I'm looking at these valve heads. So you see here, I'll zoom in a little bit. So here's our valve seal. Notice this is not raised up off the head of off the cylinder head, which is good. Our exhaust seat seems to be about the same height as the seal, roughly, which is also good. So this cylinder head appears to be in good shape. Let's move on to the next one. Here's our intake valve. Almost. Our intake valve rocker arm, I should say, and pivot. Let's get our intake valve bag. That's exhaust. Here's intake. Okay, let's take the exhaust out. You guys are gonna have to remind me to put Loctite on these bolts when I put them back in. Hopefully I'll notice though. Okay. That one was a little crunchy on there. Put that in our exhaust. And we'll get our valve spring compressor set up on the exhaust valve first. Doesn't really matter, just what I got, what's easier to get to. Compress our valve. Get our keepers out. Again, oh, there's our valve. There is okay. So that was what? That was exhaust. Don't want to confuse them. Let's get our keeper out. The magnet is super helpful for stuff like this. I got one keeper there, I got the other one there. Parts all over the bench. Now let's get our last valve, the intake valve, out. Sorry if you guys can't see that well, this is kind of awkward. Whoops. That one went somewhere. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. It's always fun when those things go shooting across the shop. You have to order new ones or you have to go find them. So we got one. There's our valve spring. Where'd the second one go? Anybody see it? Oh, here it is. Let's get our intake valve out. This one is also got quite a bit of carbon on there. Okay, so we got our cylinder heads completely disassembled. Got all of our parts labeled and in bags so we know where they go when it's time to put things back together. We'll have to clean up the valves and everything separately. So let's take a quick peek at this cylinder head. I see pretty much more of the same. It looks like the guides are about the same height. I don't see one that's higher than the other, which is a good sign. So that tells me this motor probably did not overheat at all, which is great. All right, now that we've got the heads disassembled, I think it's time to move on to the breather assembly and then the oil pump. Let's take our oil pump apart. That's held together with a couple of 5/16 screws. Hopefully will not break. And they did not. Man, I'm so lucky. There should be an O-ring and the oil pump assembly under here. And there should be just a standard Rotor pump. There we go. Give you guys a peek. Putting the screws back where they go. So we've obviously got our cover assembly and our O-ring. There's a little bit of wear on the cover, but it's not tragic. Let's take our rotor assembly out. If it wants to come out, let's try flipping it upside down. Maybe that'll be easier. And then we'll give it a good push out. There we go. So here's the rotor assembly right here. And this just rotates inside this outer shell. It's actually a pretty clever design when you think about it. And with these, this looks like a, maybe like a sintered powdered metal design. Just make sure these things aren't scored or anything like that. And then there's also inside there, I'm not going to take it apart, but there's also down in there a pressure relief spring. So if the oil pressure gets too high, it relieves out and probably into the crankcase. I'm going to take this blank cover off where the oil filter is going to go. We're supposed to go. Just probably going to replace it with an actual oil filter anyway. There we go. Just got a channel locks on it. I don't have an oil filter wrench that's this size, unfortunately. That was on there tight. Jeez. Slowly coming off. Feels super crunchy, and there's lots of, a little bit of fluid draining. Feels super crunchy, which is a little alarming. But it's out. how awesome. The threads are like totally destroyed at the end. Hopefully that's not going to be a problem. I have a feeling it's going to be though. The threads in there are a little bit boogered up. Did some research online. It looks like that's a 3/4 by 16 thread pitch. So I'll order the nipple that screws in here that allows you to attach an oil filter. I'll give you guys the part number in the description. And I'll also order a tap to clean up those threads. Because again, I think there's enough threads in there to hold things, but it's just, I don't know. It's a little crunchy for my taste. I don't want to do the cleanup with the actual threaded fitting. All right, let's move on to the breather. This is our breather cover right here. Looks like a 3/8 socket. I'll do the trick. Whenever you're taking an old motor like this apart, you want to make sure you check the condition of these hoses too. I noticed that the hose that provided crankcase pulse for the fuel pump was all cracked and distorted, so I'll have to get another one of those. Can't imagine that fuel pump was even working. Still amazed at how overall good condition this thing is in for its age. I don't know how many hours it has on it. There's clearly some use, but pretty minimal. I guess we're going to pry that off. Whoop, there we go. Pry it off and drop it. That's always what you want to do. Oh. Sorry, you get a picture in my head there. So there's our breather assembly. There's a, I guess this kind of insert thing right there. So we'll clean that stuff up. Oh, there's a bit of oil in here too. I'll dump that out. This is what it looks like when you empty it out. And this was in there about like that. I think we'll wrap up the disassembly with taking the carburetor apart and just see what that needs. So it looks like we got maybe some 7/16 nuts on some studs there. That'll separate the carburetor from the intake manifold from the looks of it. Carburetor rebuild kit is pretty expensive for this thing. I mean, even the gasket set, if you bought that from Briggs and Stratton on Amazon, I think it's like a $90 or $100 gasket set. I can get it cheaper through Stens, and Stens also has a carburetor rebuild kit for I think 30 or 40 bucks. So even that's a little pricey. So I want to make sure I only order the parts that I need here. Now, normally on every engine rebuild, I would without question replace piston rings at least. But judging by the internal condition of these rings and the cylinder bores and everything, and the fact that piston rings are $50 per cylinder, so I'm spending 100 bucks just on piston rings, I think I might skip that step. You guys feel free to criticize me. I know it's sacrilegious, but that's a lot of money to spend on piston rings for, you know, a lawnmower engine. So call me what you will, criticize me all you want, but I think that's the direction I'm going in. Because again, everything's in really good shape. So let's see. See the plate now to get. Let's see if we can take this. The bowl looks like it's held on by a couple of Phillips screws. I know that these things probably are going to love to strip out because that's what they always seem to do. A little PB blaster. Stick a brand new screwdriver on there and just see how they feel. That one loosened up. It felt a little crunchy there for a second, but came off. Let's try this one. I'm pressing down and turning at the same time. That one came off too. Okay, good. Could use an impact driver, but these screws are pretty small. Didn't want to risk breaking them. I don't know why they use Phillips screws in a carburetor bowl. Kind of baffles the mind. So that should be all that's holding it on. I might need to pry it a little bit. There it goes. I'm not feeling gas rush out, which I guess is a good sign, although it doesn't seem to want to come off. I'm guessing that that fuel shutoff solenoid is holding the carburetor on. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of thread these screws back in lightly. Not to tighten them, just to kind of hold the bowl from rotating and try to get that solenoid off. Now that solenoid, what it does is when you shut the power off to the motor, that'll release a little pintle in this solenoid that'll block fuel flow through the carburetor. They do that to prevent backfiring and emit, waste fuel and all that. It's emissions. And I guess maybe a little bit more than that. It's kind of, lack of a better term, drivability. But yeah, so I hate these things, but they're here to stay. Let me see if I can find a thin wrench to fit in there. I looked and looked and looked and didn't find any of those furniture wrenches that come with the furniture that your wife absolutely has to have. But yeah, I don't know. So I didn't feel like grinding down a good wrench. All I have are Craftsman and SK, and those are reasonably good wrenches. So I'm going to try using vice grips, needle nose vice grips, to take this thing off. So let's see how that goes. Hopefully I don't break anything. Yeah, it's feeling like I'm going to. Things on there good. Let's tighten the vice grips a little bit. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Nope, not gonna work here. I think we need an actual wrench. Huh, what do I have? Success! I did find one of those furniture wrenches. It's a 13 that seems to work just well enough. It's turning now. Not very well, but it's turning. So maybe there's some thread locker on this thing too. Jeez. Who does this? Can work at this for a little bit. Okay, never mind that. Didn't have to remove that fuel shutoff solenoid. It's nutted in the bottom of the bowl. I don't know if you guys can see that. There's a nut in the bowl that's going to prevent that from coming out anyway, so don't even bother wasting your time. It smells pretty bad in here. The carburetor, that is. Can't tell if the needle and seat is stuck yet, but we'll take this whole thing apart and stick it in the ultrasonic cleaner. That should clean it right up. So that's what she looks like down the business end right there. Yeah, I might just stick it in the ultrasonic cleaner like this. If we have to, we can always take it further apart. Not much further, but a little bit more. I changed my mind. I'm going to take the float out. Pull that pin. Take the float inlet needle out. I don't know if I want to take this off. Let's see how crunchy those screws feel. There's 2 Phillips head screws down here. Well, they're coming. I don't know what this does. Hopefully one of you guys know what it is. Maybe it's the jet is. Yeah, I guess that's where the pickup is. There's some tiny little holes in that tube there and in the other one too. Alright, maybe it's good we took this apart. Let's throw that in and see what happens. So we got simple green and hot water. We have our float, the needle, this tube. And that's what the water looked like before. So let's give it 30 minutes. Not even a minute in, it's already starting to get crusty in that area over there by where the carb's sitting. Apologize for the background noise, but I got the ultrasonic cleaner going. While that was going, I decided to try to take this further apart just because something didn't sit right with me. It looks like the jet is actually on the side of that nut in the bottom there. I realize you guys probably can't see it too well, but there's a protrusion out the side of that nut. I wanted to disassemble that further. The trick that I got, or that I used to disassemble, is I stuck a 5/8 inch wrench in the vise like this to hold that nut still, and I used the 13mm furniture wrench, as I call them, to unscrew this bowl nut, and it snapped loose pretty quickly. So let's take it apart further and see what we see. Give you guys a break with the ultrasonic cleaner noise. So here's our solenoid. It's kind of crusty too. This is probably our jet. Yeah, it is. That would have been pretty important to make sure it's really clean. You can see it right there on the side of that nut. So for now, I'm going to dunk this whole thing in the ultrasonic cleaner, let it clean with everything else, since that's probably the most important part to get clean. I'm also dunking just the tip of the solenoid into the ultrasonic cleaner, not the electronics, just that little protrusion at the end to try to loosen that up. I'm just holding it about like that. Let it sit there for a couple minutes. I got the shut-off solenoid nice and clean and nice and free. Perfect. That's what the water looks like after about 15 minutes. I think I might go change it soon. It smells horrible. The carburetor has had a lot of quality time in the ultrasonic cleaner, maybe about an hour, hour and a half. I did change the fluid once, just because it was disgusting. Let's blow everything off with some compressed air. Let's see what we got. Everything looks pretty clean. I did place a parts order for everything. I got a gasket set, carburetor rebuild kit. This is really just a bunch of gaskets and seals, nothing too fancy. What else did I get? A couple of tools that have been on my Sten's parts order list for a while. The thing with Sten's, they give you a good deal on parts, but they kind of get you on shipping. So they only charged me $10 to ship everything, so I got a couple of other things for other projects that should come in handy. So there's our carburetor body. Still have to remove the gasket and everything, but it's a heck of a lot cleaner. Got a miscellaneous screws. Got our jet. Let's take a look at it all. So there's our main jet. Still a little bit discolored, but a heck of a lot cleaner. I can see light through it now, which I couldn't before. This is that nut that secures the solenoid to the carburetor body, or I guess to the bowl. And the jet screws into that. So everything's a little discolored, but it's very clean, which is what we're after. I don't really care how discolored it is as long as it's clean. So I'm gonna get a bag, put all this stuff in there, and then we'll move on to probably just going through the valves and everything and stick those in the ultrasonic cleaner and clean those up and make sure we have no damage there. Got all the carburetor parts packaged away. I'm gonna start cleaning off some of the valves now. The way I usually clean them is I usually take them to one of these grinders here with a wire wheel. So I just turn them on, just go like this. Just takes all the carbon off really quickly and easily. Then you can do a more thorough inspection. Just like that. And you're looking for damage or pitting right on that sealing surface there where the valve meets the seat in the head. Just eyeballing this one. I don't see any major damage. Let's clean it up a bit more. I sent all of the parts for a given cylinder through the ultrasonic cleaner, all the valve train parts. Got them all nice and cleaned up. Just drying them off now. Just going to do this for the remaining valves. Make sure they're nice and dry. I'm going to put them back in the plastic bag. I'm also going to hit them with this fluid film, again, just to prevent corrosion, in case there's any residual moisture there. Don't see any damage on the actual valve, which is good. We'll put everything in our bag here. And we'll save this for reassembly. And when we reassemble, we're going to lap the valves in to get a really, really nice sealing surface. Okay, gonna do that 3 more times. Now that we got all of our valve train cleaned up and packaged away, I'm gonna take this one of these row locks and just clean up the cylinder or combustion chamber a little bit. I'm not trying to remove any material. Unless it's head gasket material. Looks like I'm out of air. Yep, out of air. And you guys are probably looking saying, oh, he's using a row lock, it's going to spray carbon everywhere, and he just cleaned all the engine parts, which are right over here. Yeah, I did. But again, that was just a preliminary cleaning. They're going to be cleaned again before final assembly, so don't worry. That was just to get all the heavy stuff off. Got both cylinder heads pretty well cleaned up. Took the row lock and just went gently over the head gasket surface just to get the old gasket material off. It's not scuffed or gouged or anything. I went very lightly over it. You don't want to take off any material. And I went inside the combustion chamber inside here and got probably 99.8% of the carbon deposits out on both cylinders. See, they're kind of shiny now. The valve seats look very nice. No pitting, no gouging, nothing. So with a little bit of tender loving care and some valve lapping compound, these heads should seal up very, very nicely. They're in great shape. All right, guys, I think that's probably going to do it for the teardown and inspection video. I'm trying to think, did I forget anything? Probably not. I think I got it all. I didn't really inspect the starter or any, like I guess the stator, but we can save that for later. We can test that when it goes back together. So again, I got a parts order into Stens. I have an engine overhaul gasket set. I have a carburetor overhaul kit with some gaskets. Again, I'm not going to replace the piston rings. This thing doesn't look like it has enough hours on there. And at $50 a cylinder, that's kind of hefty, knowing how old this motor is. It's from 2002. I'm not going to drop $200-300 on an engine that's that old. It's just not economical. You got to use your brain. And there's no obvious signs that it needs piston rings. I could take one off and stick it in the bore and gap it, and I may end up doing that, but you gotta balance the risk there. If you do that, sometimes you're... Sorry guys, my battery died. As I was saying, yeah, piston rings, not economical to replace them here. Again, this motor's too old. I don't see any obvious problems with the bore or the pistons or the rings. There's no scratching, really nothing on the bores that would, or the rings that, or the pistons that would suggest they need to be replaced. Like I was saying, I might end up gapping one, but if I break one, then I'm dropping $50 for a new set. And again, I just don't think it's worth it. So yeah, we'll pick it up once all the parts arrive, and that'll be part 2. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and stay safe. And stay tuned for part 2.